Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of EverUpwardShow, which is the New York Excelsior fan show. I am your host, Blevins, and we have got a great show for you today. If this is your first time here, I feel like it's pretty obvious what the show is, but this is a fan show all about the New York Excelsior and things related to the New York Excelsior, as well as the Contenders team XL2 Academy, which we will be talking about today because they finally played. But let's just jump right into it. I'm going to be going over some stuff that came from New York Excelsior this week, some stuff that came from the community, and go over the week's results, as well as preview a little bit about what we're going to be doing next week or this week, depending on how you look at it, in the Overwatch League. So let's jump right into it and start with the videos and information that we got from New York Excelsior. We got the Wizard Hyung Origins video. If you guys aren't familiar, go to the NYXL YouTube channel. We've got Origins videos for all the players, I believe, and we also have one for Bare Hands, Director of Player Personnel. It looks like we're starting to get into the coaching staff as well. We've got Wizard Hyung, who is a assistant coach and analyst. I'm imagining we're going to get a Pavane one as well, but who knows? So definitely check that one out. These are more of an in-depth look at the the player ones are obviously an in-depth look at the players. This one's a look into basically the origin story of Wizard Hyung, where he came from, what he's doing here now. I'm very interested to see what NYXL is going to do moving forward, because you can't rehash the origin stories, right? Maybe they'll do a looking forward or something else cool. They're really well done. They are probably some of the best production value videos of any team in the Overwatch League, so definitely check that out. In a similar vein, we had an interview with head coach Pavane. That was done, I saw it on Twitter. I've got links to all of this stuff that I'm talking about down in the description, so I'm not going to go into huge details about where everything came from, but this is a really in-depth text interview. A lot of different questions on here about the team, about the strategy, about the philosophy. There's actually a little bit on Brigitte, Hero 27 on here. But yeah, definitely worth a read. The full transcript I'm linking here is from Reddit, so definitely check that out. It's always nice to see these types of things in a nice consolidated place. We do get the AMAs on the NYXL Discord, but it's so hard to skim through that. Like I thought I was going to be able to, but like there's just so much fluff to go through, and like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions that are of absolutely no value to go through. There's rarely ever anything good or useful asked there. So, and if there is, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. So it's definitely tough to do that. But when we do get these interviews, it's really nice. I'm hoping to be able to get some original content from EverUpwardShow on here from maybe the players or the coaches. That would be really great. Getting an interview with Wizard Hyung would be a really good one. His English is actually really, really good. But yeah, definitely, if you have not already, check that one out. And the last piece of news from NYXL that we have here is they hired a former Red Bull program manager, so worked in the Red Bull, I believe, media and esports division. His name's Ben Nickel. He's going to be leading events and business development for New York Excelsior. I actually found this one on LinkedIn, like not even looking for, excuse me, for NYXL stuff. But it is definitely interesting to see the organization kind of build. So we've obviously seen a lot of team development and coaching and all that sort of stuff develop, and now we're starting to see kind of the outer shell develop for the organization. So I think it's all going to be good. It's obviously really cool that they brought someone on to lead events because that means that we might be seeing some outside of the Overwatch League events happening with NYXL, which is going to be really cool. I can't wait to have them come to New York. Even if it's the off season, maybe do like some meet and greets and stuff in New York City. That would be really cool. I don't know if that's going to happen. Obviously the players are originally from Korea, so they might want to go back and see their families. But I would imagine that at some point we're going to be seeing them in New York City, hopefully sooner rather than later. But I'll definitely be trying to get out to some of that, to some of those events if and when they do happen. But that's going to round up the stuff from NYXL. Guys, this is where I will remind you that I can use all the help I can get in finding these things. I'm basically using Reddit, the Discord channels, the normal sort of hubs of media. If there's something that you guys that I miss that you think should be on the show, let me know. Go over to the High Noon Podcast Discord, discord.me/High Noon Podcast. I've got an EverUpwardShow text channel. You can submit stuff there. You can submit stuff to the Twitter at EverUpwardShow. You can email me, everupwardshow@gmail.com. Anything that I miss or that you think should be on there that you'd like to see me do that's outside of what I'm already doing, let me know. I'm more than happy to try to accommodate and work stuff into the show. But let's move on into some of the community stuff. Now, before I go into this, I'm just going to say there's a lot of community content. I can't go over it all. That would be 3 shows worth of stuff every week. So if you see stuff that you would like to see highlighted or referenced, or if you did something, send it over. I will definitely favor the stuff that I get sent. I'm definitely willing to favor the stuff that I get sent, because I just want to talk about the stuff that you guys think is important. Yes, so let's move on. So the cool thing, I think probably the coolest thing that we saw this week was the 5 Deadly Venoms crew at Waypoint Cafe get featured on the episode of Watchpoint this week on the official Overwatch League channel, the YouTube channel. It was shown during the broadcast. Richard, aka Great Root Bear, who I have a relationship with, he's been on High Noon podcasts around the payload. They interviewed him and interviewed some other people in that group, and really kind of highlighted the 5 Deadly Venoms crew, which is awesome. I cannot wait to get down there and do some stuff and hang out with them. Don't have any announcements to make, but I've got the announcement of an announcement, classic esports style. I've been told there's going to be an announcement next week, so keep an eye out for that regarding 5 Deadly Venoms. Again, can't get into any details, but it may or may not involve me personally in New York City. I don't know. I kind of know, but I can't. I can neither confirm nor deny anything, but definitely keep an eye out and an ear out for that. Next piece of community content we got was, this is actually kind of the next 2. We got some really interesting video montages of Jonak and of Pine. They're basically highlight videos. They're done by a YouTube channel called Pro Genji Main. They're basically they're just highlights of really awesome plays that both of them make. It's just a normal sort of FaZe Clan-esque highlight video, but obviously you can imagine that Jonak and Pine have some pretty amazing highlights. They are mostly from their own personal streams, not the Overwatch League, but definitely worth a watch there. I've got the links to those as well. Another thread that I saw on Reddit was actually someone designed a custom NYXL themed Xbox controller. It's actually done right through the Microsoft website. I think you can just order Xbox controllers, custom colors. It looks really good. It looks like it was actually made to be an NYXL controller, with the exception that there's no logos and stuff on it, and there's no like Overwatch League insignia on it. But the color scheme is definitely there. So if you play console, or if you have a console and you want to have an NYXL styled controller, I would I imagine we're probably not going to see official branded stuff like this for quite some time, if ever, at least in terms of gaming controllers. So this is a really kind of a cool way to get something like that. The link to that, of course, is also in the description. The last piece we've got here is at Holly Hollywood on Twitter has been doing some fan art, and the one I wanted to talk about here was some SBB fan art. It's like basically a full like painted. It's like a really like realistic looking drawing. I don't think it's actually painted or actually drawn, but it's digital art. But she does like very realistic looking art, and she's got one of SBB. I think there might be some other NYXL players as well, but there's all sorts of Overwatch League players nonetheless, and SBB is one that she's done. It's almost kind of eerie how realistic it looks. Like you can tell it's a drawing, but some of the other ones, like the XQC one I'm looking at, and there's an IDQD one, like the shading and the lighting, and even the SBB one, like it's like eerie how realistic they look. So definitely check her out at Holly Hollywood on Twitter. Again, I have the link to the SBB one down below. Let's move on here. This is where I would normally talk about how XL did last week, but I'm going to talk first about XL2, the Contenders, XL2 Academy, the Contenders team for NYXL. They played their first match in Contenders NA. They played against Toronto Esports, and they won a very close 3-2 victory here against Toronto Esports, which is the Academy team for the Boston Uprising. Definitely, I will link this as well. Definitely worth the watch here. It's an amazing match. It's a 3-2 victory. Two of probably the top 5 teams in Contenders for sure. Duke it out here. Nene, absolute god on Tracer. Mangachu doing some crazy things. It's also what's kind of cool about Contenders, and what I think sets it apart from just it being like the Aldi's brand Overwatch League, is that they're not playing on Overwatch League patch. They're playing on live patch. So we're seeing different types of comps here because Sombra is here. It will almost certainly see Brigitte in Contenders before we see her in Overwatch League. So if you're looking for either strats to play in your own personal games, or if you're looking to see what the Overwatch League meta might be next stage or the stage after perhaps, definitely tune into Contenders, and obviously show support for XL2. Little self-plug here. High Noon Productions does a show called Blackwatch Report. It's hosted by Thornrain and Kyle Wynn. They cover all the Contenders and Tier 2 stuff. Definitely check that out. If you search Blackwatch Report in your podcast feed, you'll find that. They're going to be going in way more depth than I am on that match, I'm sure. They've got all sorts of interviews with players in the and staff in the Tier 2 scene. So if you are interested at all in the Tier 2 scene, check that out as well. Excuse me. Next week, we are going to be playing against Gladiators Legion, which, if you haven't figured it out, is the LA Gladiators Academy team. They played against the Mayhem's Academy team last week, and I believe they won against the Mayhem's team. Let me just double check that, because of course I didn't have this ready. They did. They won 3-1 versus the Mayhem Academy. All 4 of the teams, Mayhem Academy, Gladiators Legion, XL2, and Toronto Esports, have looked quite good. All of the Academy teams look quite good. So it's definitely going to be a good match here with Gladiators Legion and XL2 Academy. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And again, Blackwatch Report is going to have a much more in-depth look at that than I am. So let's move into the match results for NYXL proper, or the Overwatch League team. one note here is, again, we didn't see Pine in either match. No official word that I saw as to why he didn't play. Last week he mentioned that he needed the week off or wanted to take the week off. He wasn't feeling great, et cetera, which perfectly fine. This week maybe it was more of a strategic reason they didn't play him, or maybe he's just not what they want to be doing in this meta, which is perfectly possible. I think Pine has a lot of, obviously, versatility, or not a ton of versatility compared to Libero, and he doesn't play Tracer, so he's not replacing SBB, or he does play Tracer, but not to the same level or the same team cohesion as SBB. So it's possible that unless there's some very specific instances here, we might not be seeing a whole heck of a lot of Pine in this meta, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. If we're winning, we're winning. And as much as I love Pine, I don't want to, I don't want to play him just to play him to the team's detriment necessarily. So I'm trusting in the coaching staff. I'm trusting in the team to know who they want to play and when. I'm sure we're going to be seeing some more Pine, but for those of you who are Pine enthusiasts who think and want him to start every match, it's just not going to happen. I think we're kind of past that. But moving on, we played against Philadelphia Fusion in the first game, and like I said last week, I thought this one was going to be a real a nail biter. Fusion has looked quite good in the past couple of weeks, especially with EQO, who we don't have a ton of tape on. EQO did end up playing against us. He played both matches this week, but we ended up winning 3-1 here in a relatively decisive fashion. The one was Route 66 after we had already been up 3-0, which we've really kind of struggled there on the Route 66. It's just not a strong map for us, and also I think we kind of took our foot off the pedal here. Didn't finish, which, I mean, yes, it stinks because, as they say every single time on the broadcast, every match matters, and it absolutely does. I don't want to take away from that, especially in the stage playoff talk here. Every map is absolutely going to matter. So dropping 1 to Philly stinks, but at the end of the day, we won. And I wanted to bring this up here because I did actually make a bet with Tucker Roberts, who is the president of the Philadelphia Fusion. I made a bet with him on Twitter that he accepted that if what was going to happen, and I would have been extremely embarrassed on this show if NYXL would have lost, I would have been forced to wear a Philadelphia Fusion hat and also start a Philadelphia Fusion fan show much like this one. But if he wins, I get an awesome pair of Philadelphia Fusion sneakers, so I will definitely be wearing those once those come in. And good game, Tucker. The next bet's on you, man. If you want to put out a bet, I am more than happy to oblige. Philadelphia, I mean, last week, obviously, in rivalry mode, I'm not going to root for Philly when they're playing against NY, but I will say that the East Coast teams have a place in my heart. That's New York, Philly, Boston, and even Florida all have a place in my heart because I am an East Coaster myself, so I am going to root for the East Coast teams over any of the other teams for sure, especially if we get a Toronto team. That's probably going to be a definite contender for me to be fan. So don't think that just because you're an NYXL fan or because you're a fan of another team doesn't mean that you can't have a couple other favorite teams. I definitely am first and foremost an NYXL fan, but I am also fans of other teams. Philly is definitely a top contender for me to be one of my favorite teams, but it was definitely a good match. Even the first 3 maps here that we won were relatively close in a similar sense that they were close when we played against Houston. Houston was probably the closest 4-0 we've ever seen in Overwatch League, and this was one of the closer 3-1s that we've seen. NYXL just had a game plan and they executed it flawlessly. We saw on Volskaya the 3-pronged attack that we've been seeing where the supports are off alone, the supports are on their own, or the supports are with the tanks and SBB and Libero are kind of off on their own, distracting. And then once you see one chink in the armor, the rest of the team collapses in and just dominates. And we've seen that work very, very well for NYXL. They are a lot of people are calling them one of the cleanest teams in Overwatch League right now. They just have a game plan. It seems like they did absolutely look at the tape on Philly. I think they probably knew or imagined that EQO was going to be playing. I think he's kind of got that starting spot right now over Shadowburn, at least in many circumstances. And we kind of countered him. He did not do nearly as much as he did in his first week out. But it was definitely a well-fought match. GG's to Philly. And, I think they're probably out of the playoff run for stage 2, but they might still be in the mix depending on how they do the rest of the stage. If they can win out, they might still have an off chance, but good luck to Philly in the rest of their matches. Second match was not quite as close. It was a 4-0 versus San Francisco Shock. Notably, I mentioned last week, this was the first time we've actually played the Shock. As we did not play, they were the one team we didn't play against in stage 1. It has been said, though I don't know the actual facts behind it. It's been at least rumored that NYXL and San Francisco Shock were scrim partners a lot more often, perhaps, than other teams, just because they knew they weren't going to be playing. They could test out strategies and not worry about them getting, stolen or poached or whatever, what have you. And I thought that might actually be the one redeeming factor potentially for San Francisco, but it just did not turn out to be the case here. New York kind of dominated. I'm a little interested to know why we didn't see Pine here. It seems like, and I'll talk about this in a second when we preview next week's matches, but it seems like Pine has kind of come in and almost subbed in for SBB when it's kind of locked up or in garbage time rather. So I don't know, maybe I guess it kind of shows that New York was not taking San Francisco lightly, which I'm glad to see, but I think they kind of knew it was in the bag. They just needed to put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. So another 2-0 week for NYXL, and I do want to note here that New York has not lost since I started the show. I'm just saying. I don't want to, take all the credit for the wins, but I'm just saying they have not lost since they've had a show dedicated to them from High Noon Productions. Just saying. But that's all I'll say on that. At least this week. I'll probably be bringing it up next week when we win 2-0 again. But speaking of next week, we have quite possibly the hardest match and what is billed to be one of the best matches of the stage, and also probably one of the easiest matches of the stage. So we start out with the hard one. It's played on Wednesday. We've got Seoul Dynasty. They are undefeated in stage 1 thus far. They've looked much better than their stage 1 performance, and they did not look bad in stage 1, don't get me wrong, but they have looked even better in stage 2. They've looked more cohesive. They seem to have their team chemistry and strategy down a lot more. As we saw against Shanghai last week, Seoul Dynasty had like their A team, B team, or as Bren called it, their S- S+ team. So obviously they're going to be bringing out their A squad against us. It's going to be a slobber knocker, more so than any of the other matches, I think. I have no doubt that NY can take this. I think there's so much tape on Seoul. Granted, there's so much tape on New York as well, but I think NY is going to be able to pull this one out. It's also possible. I speculated about this before in last stage before we played Seoul, that it's possible. Now, this is a little tinfoil hat, so bear with me here. It's possible that NY has been sandbagging Pine and the Pine strategies for this meta in this stage so that they can pull it out against Seoul and have no tape on Pine this meta, or very little tape on Pine this meta. It's possible. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen, but it is definitely something they can have in their back pocket to pull out and really kind of pull out the ace in the hole, the wild card of Pine, who there just is not enough tape on him, especially if he's been practicing some crazy stuff. Who knows? They could definitely, like, they have the ability to change it up. As we've also talked about when we played against Houston, when we knew that we weren't going to have to be worried about Jake's tracer as much. We shifted our play style to be a little bit more aggressive. Now, I think we're probably going to have to worry about Munchkin or potentially Bunny, though probably Munchkin. We're going to have to worry about Munchkin's tracer a bit more than, actually probably a lot more than Jake's. But I do think that it's possible that we can see New York shift to that more aggressive style. Jonak and Ark have obviously been dominant this stage as well, as they were in the previous stage, but I think I think we're a little bit better matched than Seoul here. I think our tank line is slightly better. They have Miro, obviously, but just hasn't. It just has not been as big. I mean, Toby Ryo Jae-hong is a great support line as well, but I mean, Ark Jonak is just, it's another level. One thing that I actually didn't mention, or maybe I mentioned it last week, I don't think I did though, but there was a video about Jonak, or a clip about Jonak, that asked him about his role models, and it was the Jonak Origins video. That asked him about his role models, and he actually said that Ryo Jae-hong from Seoul Dynasty is one of his role models in esports. So that's kind of cool that that's going to happen. But I think Jonak's kind of transcended him. No Zenyatta pun intended. But all in all, I mean, this is going to be a great match. It's billed to be one of the best matches of the stage. It also, it's going to determine. It's not actually going to determine the stage playoffs, but it is likely that we are going to see this match at least one more time. I guess at most one more time in the stage playoffs. I'm imagining that one of these two teams is going to be the number one seed. Actually, this is technically going to be, depending on the map differential, we'll be fighting for the number one seed here, or at least putting them in a position for the number one seed here. It's worth noting that arguably, New York's schedule has been a little bit tougher than Seoul, so maybe Seoul looks a little bit better than they actually are. But it's who knows? And I believe that the rest of the stage, we're not playing against the Gladiators this stage, so it's possible that we're going to dodge a bullet here, as Gladiators is looking quite good. But all in all, I've spent too much time on this match. All in all, it's going to be a great match to watch. Absolutely. If you only have time for one match this week, watch this one. Support the guys. Support NYXL here. Anyone that mentioned Seoul this week is losing points in my book. So definitely want to support them. And then we move on to Shanghai. Really not a lot to talk about here. I think it's going to be an easy 4-0 for NY. One thing I want to emphasize here is just don't throw maps, especially depending on the result of the Seoul match. Every map is going to count for these Stage 2 playoffs, and we definitely want to be in the Stage 2 playoffs, and we want to be ranked 1 in the Stage 2 playoffs. If we beat Seoul, we're going to have the same stage record. If everything else is, if both teams win out, we're gonna have the same stage record. So it's all gonna come down to map differential here. So we don't want to be throwing any maps that we don't have to, especially against a team like the Shanghai. Almost said it. The Shanghai Dragons. We definitely don't want to be playing against or throwing maps against the Shanghai Dragons. One other note here is that this is probably, we'll almost certainly see Pine. Last time we played, we saw Pine actually playing the Tracer. Like, it could be like SBB's week off, potentially, or maybe even Libero getting a week off. I don't know. But unless we start seeing some of the acquisitions from Shanghai come in and potentially shake things up, I don't think we're going to have any sort of resistance here. It should be an easy 4-0, and that'll be good. But that's going to be it obviously those are the matches we've got this week. And then, so we've got those matches this week. And then next week is actually week 5 of stage 2. So that's the last week, which feeds into the playoffs. So the last week we're going to be playing against Dallas Fuel and the LA Valiant. So 2 more wins. If we beat Seoul here, it's likely that we're going to be first place. Seoul, I guess Seoul has to play London this week in addition to New York. So definitely Seoul has the, I guess, harder rest of the stage compared to New York. So very likely that that this is playing for first seed in the stage playoffs, which is absolutely going to be huge for NY. And then of course we'll have the stage one. We'll have the stage playoffs played on Sunday. So that'll take us to the end of the stage. I want to close out the show here. Didn't have a ton of questions this week, which is perfectly fine. But if you guys do have any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, anything that you want to see on the show, head over. Either leave a comment on this video, tweet at me, send me a message on Discord. All of those types of things are really going to be helpful. One question that we did have, or was more of a concern, where is the show going to be? Where's the show's home going to be in terms of the podcast feed? So I did make the Ever Upward Show individual podcast feed. So if you Google or if you search for Ever Upward Show on wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's iTunes or one of the third-party podcast providers, if you search Ever Upward Show, we have our own podcast feed that's separate from High Noon Podcast. I might put it on High Noon Podcast feed as well for one more week, but we are going to be moving over completely to Ever Upward Show. So if you are listening to this on the High Noon Podcast feed, make sure you go and subscribe and follow and what have you, the Ever Upward Show podcast feed. Everything is still going to be on the same YouTube, High Noon Podcast YouTube. That's going to be everything, where everything's going to be as well if you're not a podcast listener. But that is going to be the end of the show, guys. Again, huge thanks to everyone who's watching and retweeting and follows on Twitter. All of the support is super, super helpful. We do want to start doing these types of shows for other teams. So if you are interested in another team, let us know who you want to see. But obviously this show is always going to remain NYXL themed. But that's all I've got for you guys. Remember, any questions, comments, gripes, groans, complaints, concerns, suggestions, anything at all, let me know. It is super, super helpful. And it, like right now, not getting a ton. So whatever you put on, whatever you let me know, almost certainly going to make it on the show. But yeah, that is going to be it, guys. Thanks for listening, and remain. I don't know how to end the show. Remain ever upward, stay ever upward. I don't know. But let's just end it with "Let's go NYXL. Let's beat Seoul." Bye, guys.